Alright, hello and welcome to Group 2 LSR here on this fine Sunday afternoon or evening, wherever you are at. I'd like to welcome you all to Silverstone here today for round 9. Sorry for the no stream last week. I had something that I had to catch up with, but happy to be back with you today for versus 18-minute quali, followed by if I'm not mistaken, 26 laps around the British Grand Prix. I'll be your host today. Vacant Haddock, or you can call me Andrew, whichever one you'd like or prefer. And yeah, just looking to hopefully have a good race, a very solid race with a full lobby yesterday over in Group 1. A little bit of a smaller lobby this time round, but still should be very interesting, very good racing. And if you're looking to get a little bit more Group 1 see a little bit more F1 League racing action, maybe a good idea to go check out that video in videos as soon as you're done watching this one, as we see T34 in that AlphaTauri coming out on his outlap here, the number 34. But should be an interesting race here around Silverstone. Tons of iconic corners and some great racing in the actual 2022 British Grand Prix. And so we should see some great racing here. Just to give you a brief little update on the standings as I pull them up here, it's Crooner in that Red Bull there, whose name you can see in 8th, currently leading. Our second place in the championship, Bamboo Vegas, sadly could not make it today, so he will not be here during this race. As we can see, T34 making his way through Maggots, Beckett's, and Chapel. And then you have a nice little battle going on for 3rd currently with Formula Jonah in the Williams, currently sitting 3rd, about 5 points ahead of Elgem, who won last time out around Singapore. Again, sorry about no stream there, but just had something come up, so I wasn't able to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and take a full lap here with T34 as we start the lap here, heading down the Hamilton Straight. So it should be nice, clean. Gotta watch out for that car on the outlap on the exit. Keeps it nice and clean, but he did invalidate, so he will not be the first to set a lap time now. Coming down now through turn number 5 and onto this first of 2 DRS zones. We'll see throughout the lap. I'm sorry that I don't have the names up. I really should. There we go. But heading now in through Brooklands and Luffield. You want to keep it nice and clean and be careful on exit there because it's really easy to lose that back end under traction. Coming now through Woodcut and blasting down towards Cops. Again, another point in the circuit where it's going to be very easy to just run that little bit wide and get your lap time invalidated. Now through Maggots and Beckett's. It's going to be very important to try and run as single file as you can through there, and then maximize that exit as you get back out through Chapel and get ready for that run down towards Stowe. Nice, fairly hard braking. Going to try and maximize all the track on the outside there. Come all the way back to your right then, as we see the AlphaTauri dive off into the pit lane after invalidating that lap. So we'll have Yaboring as the first driver to cross the line in that Mercedes car. So he'll be setting that time that everybody wants to beat, and his time is a 1:28.4. Zercity in the Red Bull will be next across the line. Actually, he's just starting his lap, so not quite. Elgem next across the line with a 1:28.8. So a solid time there. Viperize in the Alpine now coming through. Out of Club. Where will he go? He will go 3rd with a 1:44.5, likely a mistake from the Alpine driver. Dodaligo with a mistake early on in that lap. He doesn't have a front wing on that Aston Martin, so he'll have to dive into the pits here. Now you have James in that orange and pink McLaren spinning there as he goes through Stowe, so he'll lose that lap time, and I believe that's Formula Jonah coming, kind of blasting past by him, coming through these final couple of corners in that Williams car. How far up will the driver in 3rd in the standings go? He will put in a 1:29.4. for his first lap. It's not Zercity, it's Crooner, the championship leader, to the line, and he goes to the top with a 127.9, so almost half a second clear of Boring back there in second is the Red Bull. With Duncan coming to the line next, and Speedy Gunner with a 129.7 and a 130, both rather close to each other, but getting laps in P5 and P6. Kevin Cow next to the line. He will go P4 with a 129.1, I believe making his debut here in Group 2. He made his group debut for LSR in yesterday's Group 1 race, I believe coming in 13th, if I'm not mistaken. So we have Zercity now splitting both Mercedes, so it's Red Bull 1-3, Mercedes 2-4 after these first couple of qualifying runs. I believe Viperize is also putting in a more competitive lap time now out of the final corner. Where will he go? He will go 6th. So it's Alpine 5-6 then. So the order's starting to filter out. We got T34 on an out lap. He should be the next to set a lap time. It's currently Crooner from Boring, followed by Zercity and Elgem. That top 4 is within about a second of each other, so they're going to be looking to catch up to this man right here, Crooner, who's currently sitting on pole, and will be likely diving into the pits here and get that fresh set of tires. James, of course, going to be looking to improve a little bit after making a spin, having a spin through Stowe on that first lap, but rather competitive from a lot of these drivers early on here. So if you'll just give me a second, I can properly pull up all the names of everything, so that way I at least sound like I know what I'm talking about. If you'll just give me 1 second. There we go. So very, very competitive right now. It's definitely surprising to see Formula Jonah down in 7th right now, given that he's sitting in 3rd in the driver's standings. And after taking a look at those driver standings, we might as well get an update on the constructor's standings, as I believe T34 is starting his lap, so we'll sit on board with the AlphaTauri driver. But when taking a look at the constructor's standings, it's Red Bull on 159 points and leading the way, followed by Haas on 131, Mercedes on 118, and Williams on 109. Nice battle for 5th going on between Ferrari and AlphaTauri. Of course, unlucky to not have any of the Ferrari drivers be able to make it today, as drivers seem to be coming out of the pit lane to start their second laps. Followed by Alpine on 48 points, McLaren on 42, Alfa Romeo on 36, and Aston Martin on 32, going to be looking to make some ground back up, as we see T34 first out of the pit lane, now first to start to set a second lap after invalidating that first time round. AlphaTauri is fairly clean there as he comes down onto the hangar straight now. DRS wide open at the rear. Can keep it clean now through Stowe. Keep us right within that track limits now as we come down into Vale and through Club. Of course, we saw a brilliant battle here in real life, and as he comes down onto the pit straight, spins across the line and still goes 5th, even with a big loss of time there. So certainly more time left for the AlphaTauri. Duncan in the Aston Martin will be next to cross the line, looking to go better than a 130.0. Where will he go to? He will not improve. So let me pull up the lap data. Much better. But Duncan not improving. Can his teammate Joe DeLigo improve? He will not. But he'll have both Mercedes at least one Mercedes fairly close behind, because here comes Boring close behind, I believe potentially on an outlap. But going to be potentially looking to get a tow from that Aston Martin car of Joe DeLigo. Boring comes across the line with a 128.4. Will be the time he is chasing, as well as his teammate Elgem close behind. So he'll be starting a lap. Crooner, I believe, is starting a lap now, as Dodoligo with another spin. That's right at the entrance to Village. So he'll be looking to make amends on a later lap there. But it might be good to keep an eye on Boring's Mercedes as he improves by a 1/10 of a second through that first sector now, making his way through Woodcut and through Luffield and on the exit of Woodcut now. Through the exit of Woodcut now. making the run down to the cops, of course, where there was the big incident between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen back in 2021. Just uses all of that track to the outside, and now looking to keep it clean through Maggotts and Beckett's, attacking that curve to the inside, attacking those curves to the inside a little bit. Fairly clean now, coming down onto the hanger straight. It will keep it nicely within the track limits. Of course, speeds approaching 195 to 200 miles an hour as you come into that speed trap, and then you're going to want to make sure that you get your braking point right, as shown by Boring, who now has a spin similar to a way we saw from James earlier on there, and Elgem as well has invalidated. So neither Mercedes car will have the chance to improve this time around. Let's see what time Elgem has as he comes across the line to get an idea of where he could come in. It was a 128.3, which would put him ahead of his teammate if he had gotten that lap in. James now coming through these final couple of corners. How far can he jump up the order from a 145? He will go 7th ahead of Viperize in the Alpine. There's an Alpha Tauri that I believe is on this Alexis Beast, who's just starting a lap there. I want to say Viperize. No, it's his teammate of Kevin who will be pulling into the pits here after invalidating. Formula Jonah now 3/10 up on his first time in his Williams. How far can he improve from currently sitting P9? Currently the final podium of the championship, clean out of those final couple of corners, and he will go 4th fastest ahead of Elgem, improving by almost 3/4 of a second. Now we got Viperize coming through. He's already 3/10 up through the first part of the lap as he comes into these final 3 corners. Gonna have to keep it clean on the exit of Club now as it comes through these final couple of corners with just under 6 minutes left to go in qualifying. Viperize will go 3rd fastest, so goes even quicker than Xercity, as Speedy Gunner invalidated earlier on in the lap, which meant he had to pit and not improve from his 129.7 that he set earlier on. Alexis Beast still looking to set a lap. 104.1 through those first 2 sectors. So, of course, going to be setting personal bests through here. We've seen 2 spins through Usto already, but Alexis Beast is able to keep it nice and clean. And now come through Vale and Club, where, of course, Lewis Hamilton had that very nice double overtake in the closing stages. Alexis Beast will go 2nd fastest, so it goes almost right up to the top. But Crooner was still with a nice 3/10 of a second gap to any of the other drivers in this qualifying session. I believe we're going to see just about everybody going around to potentially try and get a 3rd and maybe even a 4th qualifying lap in here. Maybe just enough time to get that done as we see T34 pulling into the pit lane now. Kevin Incal in the Alpine on an out lap. I believe Viperize as well on an in lap. In addition to, and so I believe the next driver to set a lap may be Duncan here in the Aston Martin. So Aston Martin at the back of the field right now, going to be looking to jump up nicely from there. I think Dodoligo invalidating on those first 2 laps, and Duncan not quite getting the cleanest lap he might have wanted that first time round. So let's see what the Aston Martin drivers can do here. You can see that Lando Norris helmet right on Duncan's car, so we ride on board here. Down onto the Hamilton straight. So going to keep it nice and tidy here through Abbey, and then through Farm. Could be very easy to lose the back end as you come through there. Braking fairly late, about 75 to 50 meters. And then as you really important to get a clean exit now through Aintree and down onto the Wellington Straight. Of course, that first of the DRS zones. Almost a 10th up is Duncan on that first time, so he's going to be looking to pick up another 2 if he wants to improve at all from that 12th position. From the exit, coming through Woodcut now, and in the run down into Cops, as Speedy has said that there is a heavy rain race, which is very important to know, as that could mean that there's a definite difference of choices in setup. It could be very interesting to see who decides to go what way. So we will have a wet British Grand Prix for you here today. So that should be very interesting, as Duncan is now half a second quicker than his previous lap time as we stay on board with the Aston Martin. Looking to keep it clean now through Stowe. Keeps it within the track limits in the run down to Vale now. Looking to attack that curb to the inside. And then looking to maximize traction as you come out of these last couple of corners. And Duncan will improve one spot up into P11. So Aston Martin maybe having a chance to get another lap in after burning off a little bit more fuel potentially. As Kevin Cal and that Alpine setting a lap. He's 3/10 up on his first lap time. Cleanly does it through Stowe. Hard braking now. Looking to really attack that red curbing there on the inside. How far can the Alpine go up the order? He can improve 2 spots up into 7th as he improves by about 4/10 of a second. Viperize on a lap as he comes down here. He'll be the next to cross the line and improve with just under 2 minutes left to go as we see all the drivers start to pour out of the pit lane. How far can Viperize improve? Can he improve from 4th or potentially challenge somebody further up the order? I don't believe so because it seems that he's made a mistake with a lap time up in the 2 minutes. Actually, no, a 1:28.6, so improving by 6 seconds, or 6/10, I believe, if that timing is correct, but potentially just going straight into another lap. But he's going to have to watch out for traffic later in that lap. LGM and Speedy Gunner really close together as they make their way through the final couple of corners. Where can these two drivers come out? The Mercedes driver cannot improve from P8. Speedy Gunner as well, not improving from 12th, but they'll have time to get another lap in now. As we see, I believe that's Formula Jonah crossing the line now. He'll go 6th, possibly go 6th fastest, unless I'm seeing that wrong. T34 on an out lap, so keeping an eye on Alexis Beast, who's also just starting a lap. So definitely very difficult to see who's on a lap and who is not, as we have just about 40 seconds left. Is that Crooner? No, that's the other Red Bull of Xercity going rather slowly through these final couple of corners, potentially jockeying for some track positioning now. There's a yellow flag in Sector 1 for a stopped McLaren. That's James yielding to other drivers on a flying lap. Is there issues on that McLaren? No, he's just trying to heat up his tires a little bit. But about 15 seconds left. So the McLaren going to be cutting it very close here, about 10 seconds now. Coming through Vale and Club. Can the McLaren get to the line and start a lap? 5 seconds now. 3, 2, 1. And he does get the lap in, I believe. So the McLaren will be the last to finish now. Kevin Cal crosses the line and stays 7th fastest. LGM will be next to cross the line. For Mercedes, as Speedy Gunner has to pull into the pit lane or makes potentially a mistake. LGM goes 2nd fastest for Mercedes, but it's still Crooner taking that pole position as it stands. The Williams of Formula Jonah will not improve because he invalidated that lap time. Alexis Beast in the AlphaTauri will be falling behind. And can he improve from 3rd? Cuts to the line, and he only stays 3rd quickest, even though he improved on that lap. I believe we have Duncan now coming through these final couple of corners, and the Aston Martin going to be looking to improve. It looks like that Alfa Romeo just stuck on the infield grass, so staying off the circuit, thankfully. Duncan cannot improve from 11th and will stay there. Currently, I believe that's Crooner. That's not Crooner coming through, but he is improving. Xercity through into the line. How closer can he get to his teammate? He can jump up into 4th place. I believe that it's Dodaligo just in front of Crooner now, as these two come to the line. Dodaligo, of course, without a lap time yet. How far can the Aston Martin driver look to jump up into the points? He can go 10th fastest, and Crooner goes even faster with a 1:27.8. And so it'll be James last to the line, and he will finish P10 as of right now, and it'll be Boring pulling into the pit lane now. So the order is now set for this British Grand Prix. It'll be Crooner taking pole position, the championship leader, ahead of the pack for this wet British Grand Prix, followed by the by LGM in the Mercedes, and Alexis Beast in the AlphaTauri, Xercity in 4th, and Boring in 5th. But again, it's very important to keep in mind that it could be a very, very challenging British Grand Prix and potentially with a number of safety cars, as it is heavy rain predicted for this race when we jump in just about a minute's time. So definitely, if you're here, drop a quick subscription if you haven't done that already. Be very kind of you to do so. Drop a like on the video as well, or on the live stream if you're in that chat. If you have any predictions, feel free to share them as well. It could be a very interesting race, as you can see the starting order here. But definitely drop a subscription, drop a like, and stick around for the next 26 laps of the British Grand Prix. I, for one, need a break to hydrate, so give me a couple seconds to do that. Whew. Which could be very interesting. Formula Jonah potentially a little bit out of place in 7th. Could be very interesting to see how he tries to make his way through the order. The Aston Martins towards the back going to be fighting for those points that they need, looking to pull Aston Martin out of that 10th place in the drivers' standings. But overall, should be a very interesting race, and it seems that no EA issues as we load in here. So also going to be important to see fuel strategy, if anybody wants to be bold and potentially take intermediate tires here, as you can see the rain falling here in Silverstone. So should be getting into the race shortly, as somebody very quickly getting their strategy set up and ready to go. There's Brian D cheering for Formula Jonah in that chat. Definitely nice to see you in there. Of course, Jonah sitting in 3rd right now in our drivers' championship. So certainly going to be very interesting to see how these drivers cope with this wet weather here. Of course, no formation lap due to some of the bugs that it provides. So we're just going to get straight into the racing now, as we now have 5 lights and are now underway here with the British Grand Prix. It seems to be a very solid run for Crooner, as Alexis Beast gets a great jump from P3 and is ahead of LGem as we filter through. A number of drivers wide there. That's an Alpine wide there in the background. But it's Crooner leading away from Alexis Beast and LGem, and then you got Alpines in 4th and 5th, as Inters seem to be the tire all round for these drivers as we start the race. So it's Crooner with about a half-second gap, as James and Formula Jonah swap places, as well as the Alpines. Viperize potentially having issues towards the back under traction there. But Formula Jonah, one of the big losers, he's dropped all the way down into 12th now, as T34 and James are going at it in P9 and P10, and it's the McLaren, that orange and pink McLaren looking up the inside of the AlphaTauri, but he's going to have a little bit more grip around the outside now as they run side by side into Cops. It's James with a slight advantage, as you can see this car's scrambling to get some tire temperature going into those cars, but are able to keep it fairly close. 2/10 separate Crooner and Alexis Beats at the front. Battle of the Bulls here at the front. Here between these two drivers, of course, going to have no DRS here in these wet conditions, but a gap of about a quarter of a second now. Alexis B is going to be looking to deploy plenty of ERS, and will he look to make a move now? He will here on lap 1, goes down the inside of the Red Bull, keeping it nicely and side by side, getting it stopped, and it's the Red Bull of Crooner able to retain the lead now, as we come here through the last parts of lap 1, and looks around the outside. AlphaTauri of Alexis Beat looks around the outside, looking up the inside now through the final corner, down onto the Hamilton straight. Very good racing between the two, but it's very close, and they just about keep it together and keep it very clean as we end lap 1. And Alexis Beat looking to the inside again, and now takes the lead of the British Grand Prix here on lap 1, away from Crooner in the Red Bull. Very nice move that sadly was missed there due to the camera angle from those other cars behind, but Alexis Vies takes the lead and is already going to be looking to stretch that gap, as he's shown a lot of pace early on in these wet conditions, as Yaboring and Zersity battle on. His Formula Jonah receives a time penalty back there, and it's the Mercedes of Yaboring moving up into 5th position. So looking back towards the front, those front 3 separated by about 0.7 of a second, and already starting to form their own little bit of a race now. About 6 or 7 tenths now, as we can see Formula Jonah and Speedy Gunner going side by side as they run down here, and Formula Jonah will drop to the back of the order. But as we go through Maggots and Beckett's, it's still the AlphaTauri leading from the Red Bull and the Mercedes. So we're going to looking to power down the hangar straight now. Does the AlphaTauri have enough space to defend from the Red Bull? It does look like he does. That's a much bigger gap than the first time around, as we have a yellow flag. I believe that's Dota Ligo spun out. Where's that? Through Maggots and Beckett's. There may have been contact there that caused that, but it's also easy to get on the curbs a little bit and spin there in the wet, so that Aston Martin driver is going to be looking to try and recover those places back. But Alexis B starting to stretch that gap a little bit. It's already up about 0.4 of a second as Viperize overtakes T34 here through Club and moves up into 8th position. And of course, that battle not done is T34 and Duncan still going at it, and there's Viperize that they're both going to be looking to overtake there in the foreground as we go on board with the other AlphaTauri driver with his teammate leading the race. Of course, it's very easy to make just a little mistake on power here. Looked like the AlphaTauri may be getting a little bit loose on exit. But that's certainly going to be a battle for 9th. The battle for 9th there is certainly going to be something to watch out for as we see Speedy Gunner and Formula Jonah going at it. Jonah looking around the outside as they get to the end of the Wellington Straight into Brooklands, and Luff switches back to the inside here for Luffield. Can he make the move stick down the inside of the Alfa Romeo driver? Not quite, as Speedy Gunner's just about to get up ahead. But Jonah still looking to the inside, but not quite able to get that move done. But the story right now, Alexis B starting 3rd on this grid, able to get a nice jump and take the lead just after the end of lap 1 as Viperize receives a 3-second time penalty for exceeding track limits. But this pack of 3 out at the front already looking to having a nice little pull away. As we see braking now here. Once again here at the end of lap 3, going to be looking to keep it nice and clean, use all the track there that he can as he comes down here and sets the fastest lap with a 1:39.8, and the gap now out to a second ahead of Crooner. So could we be looking at a potential battle here of strategy or tire management between these drivers? Because Alexis has shown really strong pace early on, but it's going to be very interesting to see how the conditions continue to progress, as well as how that tire wear kicks in. It's going to be 2 very important factors to watch and see if anybody ends up switching to those blue-walled wet tires as this race continues, and if anybody will even go for a no-stop, as Viperize seems to be round. Where's that? That is right as they go into the Wellington Straight. So potentially just lost traction out of there, and he'll drop to the back of the field back into 13th. It doesn't seem that there's any significant damage to that Alpine car, but he'll be looking to recover nonetheless. Looking down the field, seems to be some gaps starting to form. You got Crooner and Elgin separated by about 6 or 7 tenths. But Alexis B showing that he can manage, that there's a bit more control in that car, so he can take off a little bit more wing as he has a little bit more pace, or potentially a little bit more of an advantage in traction, as that gap increased about 2 seconds as they came down the hangar straight. Got Formula Jonah and Speedy Gunner swapping places again. The Alfa Romeo and the Williams driver battling since really early on in this race, giving a nice little bit of space here. Looks like the Alfa Romeo going to be continuing to hold the advantage as they go through these final couple of corners. The Williams looking to have really nice traction, but just not able to quite make a move stick on Speedy Gunner as they battle over this final point scoring position. As we look up the grid a little bit, it's about half-second gap from Elgem to Crooner as Duncan and T34 swap places as they continue to battle side by side. The AlphaTauri and the Aston Martin continue to go, and it's T34 who has the advantage for now, but Duncan going to be looking around the outside. His yellow flag in Sector 1, that's Viperize round again as they come into turns number, 4 and 5. As T34 and Duncan continuing to go at it. I believe it's T34 making that move stick finally on the Aston Martin, and now going to have a chance to run a little bit away from the Aston Martin behind and have some time to go chase after James as Yelboring and Kevin Cal go at it, and it's Yelboring able to make the move stick out of Copson as they go into Maggots and Beckett. It's currently a Mercedes 3-4. So it should be very interesting to see if these two can end up joining this pack at the front of Alexis, Crooner, and Elgem, who seem to be in a little bit of a league of their own as it stands. But about the closest battle here on track now is about the 4/10 between Crooner and Elgem. As we come across the line to start lap number 6, it seems to be Alexis leading, not necessarily comfortably, but certainly by enough to allow for some slight mistakes, but he's going to have to look to be very consistent throughout the rest of this race. You can see the rain continuing to fall, if I'm not mistaken, here at Silverstone. As Alexis Beast making a big mistake there, will Crooner be able to take advantage? Looking around the outside, and the Alexis Beast is round! Alexis Beast round through entry and onto the Wellington Straight, and the leader since overtaking Crooner on lap 2 spins and is going to drop all the way to 7th as James goes down the inside. And so it's the championship leader, Crooner, that now once again leads this race after losing that lead just at the beginning of lap 2. You can see Alexis be looking to make that move back on James a little bit further down the field, but not quite going to have it as they run down towards Cops. So going to be able to hold it. It's an AlphaTauri running a little bit wide and looking to potentially make a move here as they come back onto the hangar straight as Alexis Beast receives a 3-second time penalty, potentially due to that spin. Looking to get really nice traction out of here is the AlphaTauri driver, but not quite going to have the top speed to challenge with James as it stands as they come down the hangar straight now. So it'll be the McLaren clear as they still come through here, and it's going to be Crooner now looking to stretch that gap as opposed to Alexis Beast, as Dodaligo and Formula Jonah going at it. The Williams now looking around the outside of the Aston Martin car, but not quite able to make that move stick. So Jonah potentially going with a more dry weather inclined setup, which might be why he's struggling in these wetter conditions and struggled maybe off that start. But that's certainly something that'll have to be talked about, as 1/10 separates the Aston Martin and the McLaren. They go side by side now through Village. Can they keep it nice and clean? It looks like maybe a little bit of contact between the two, but it does seem to be Alexis Beast that takes back P6 from James 4-4-3, even with that 3-second time penalty. You can see that McLaren running a little bit wide in the background as we run through now. But Alexis Beast is certainly going to be doing everything that he can to make up for that earlier mistake, and next target in his sights is going to be Zercity in that Red Bull. If you're just joining us here on lap 6 of the British Grand Prix, it was Alexis Beast leading early on in this race from lap 2 until lap 6, until just a brief mistake putting a little bit too much power down through Aintree led to him dropping all the way down into 7th place, just overtaking James on this lap. But it's currently the championship leader of Crooner leading the way from Elgem, who, if I remember correctly, was winner last time out in Singapore. So the battle between these two is certainly going to be interesting to watch as this race continues. Of course, Elgem winning out in Monza ahead of Crooner, so these two certainly not alien to battling each other, as Crooner sets a new fastest lap of the race with a 1:39.5. So certainly still a lot of pace in these intermediate tires, as Alexis Beast with another spin, this time just coming out onto the Hamilton straight, and it's another mistake from the AlphaTauri driver, who showed such promising pace early on, and it's now dropped all the way back down into 9th position. So certainly a challenging day for the AlphaTauri. I'm going to be looking to just pick up as many points as possible now, with just about, I believe, 18 or 19 laps to go. jumping back up to the front. It's still Crooner with about a 7/10 second lead from Elgem. That's the way it's been for a majority of this race. If you missed the AWS graphic earlier, it was predicting a one-stop for a lot of this field, as Dodoligo and Speedy Gunner seem to be going at it a little bit down the orders. It's going to be Dodoligo looking up the inside, but it's the Alfa Romeo making that outside defense work again as they now go down into Cops. So we saw Formula Jonah try that move a couple of times against Speedy Gunner to similar results. It's the Alfa Romeo defending nicely from the Aston Martin. They come down now into Maggots and Beckett's. We're right on, Dodoligo is right on that gearbox of the Alfa Romeo. Potentially a little bit of contact there. Nose to from front to rear. Going to be looking to deploy potentially on the back here. Overtake being deployed by the Aston Martin, but the Alfa Romeo still defending to the inside. Potentially looking for that cutback is Dodoligo. Going to be looking to the outside as they come down here into the boot here. Around the outside, trying to break that a little bit later, a little bit of contact between the two drivers as they come now. And of course, Formula Jonah waiting in the wings should anything happen. And it's the Alfa Romeo back up the inside, and there's contact again between the Aston Martin and the Alfa Romeo. Very fierce battling between Dodoligo and Speedy Gunner retakes the position. As both Dodoligo and Speedy Gunner go off track. Both going a little bit wide, and they're still battling side by side as they come through this section now. And it's the Aston Martin this time with the inside, but it's the Alfa Romeo with a little bit better traction as they come through the exit of that corner. So Speedy Gunner putting up a mammoth defense on Dodoligo, who's just trying to find any way to get past. As Zersity receives a 3-second time penalty. And now it's the Aston Martin switching back to the outside now, looking to get a move done and get that slightly better traction and carry a little bit more speed, but the Alfa Romeo still able to defend. Certainly great racing, as I believe that's Formula Jonah running a little bit wide in the background, but able to overtake Dodoligo, who had a little bit of a mistake there on the exit. And as we go into Cops, it's Formula Jonah in 11th place, looking to now chase down Speedy Gunner. So this could be a very interesting battle as this continues, as a lot of the pack seems to be spread out. Definitely Duncan's battle against the two Alpha Tauris a little bit further up the field is going to be something to watch as this continues. As here comes Jonah. Ona now looking to the inside of the Aston Martin, and he'll be able to get the move done for the moment. Not quite done yet, though, as they still battle side by side. And it's Speedy Gunner again looking to the inside. Formula Jonah with the advantage, really attacking that curve, but he's going to be compromised on exit there, and so it'll be Speedy Gunner still holding on to that 10th place as they start their 10th lap. So keeping an eye on this battle is definitely going to be something as we run down into turn 3. Jonah going to be looking up the inside now, a little bit of a front lock there from the Williams driver as they go through now. Going to be looking to really maximize that exit now. As we come down onto this old first DRS zone. This Formula Jonah receiving a 3-second time penalty out here onto the Wellington straight. But it will be Speedy Gunner being able to retain 10th place for the moment from the two behind him. Definitely going to be looking to make a move as this race continues. So I'll definitely keep an eye on that fight. But again, further up the order, it's Crooner holding a little bit more of an advantage now over Elgin, able to increase that gap to about 1.8 seconds. Actually dropped to 1.5 now. But it's the Red Bull driver and the championship leader out here at the front. He steps a new fast lap of the race with a 139.0. T34 and a Lexus Beast with about a 10th separating them as they come through now, and it's T34 yielding to a Lexus Beast. There's Formula Jonah and Speedy Gunner going at it again. Here comes the Aston Martin. They're looking to be almost 3 wide as they come now through Stowe. And the Williams finally able to make the move stick. Speedy Gunner runs a little bit wide, and Dodoligo takes advantage. So Speedy Gunner drops to 12th as they continue to battle now. The Alfa Romeo and the Aston Martin still going at it. But the Alfa Romeo just running that little bit too deep. And so now it's Formula Jonah in the last of the point-scoring positions. They're going to be looking to continue to defend as this battle rages on behind. Definitely has allowed Alexis beats T34R and Duncan to pull ahead nicely away at the front. So that's certainly the battle to watch as Uner now receives a 3-second time penalty, I believe, for running a little bit wide down at Cops as he comes now through Maggots and Beckett's going to be looking to keep it nice and clean. Not attack those curbs too much, as it can be very easy places to spin that car. But Elgin now just looking to keep it nice and close, stay potentially within slipstream range of that car. It'll be very interesting as we get to the midpoint of this race to think about where the pit stops could be. Of course, you don't have to pit. If I'm not mistaken, you do not have to pit during a wet race if you want to continue on this set of inters for an entire race. That is an option to all of our drivers. So it'll be a very interesting thing to watch and consider, as that strategy call could lead to somebody from a bit further down the order potentially making some big strides up the field. As it seems that Formula Jonah and Dodoligo now going at it. Williams defending from the Aston Martin now as Duncan receives a 5-second penalty for corner cutting, potentially making a brief mistake there, and just having to cut across to keep that car moving, as Dodoligo and Speedy Gunner are the first drivers to pull into the pit lane. I don't believe there's any damage to either of those cars, but we have our first two drivers diving into the pit lane here in the British Grand Prix. It'll be interesting to see how their pace starts to come into it, as Viper is here a little bit loose on the exit. Those drivers changing their tires, but the gap is about 1.6 seconds now from Crooner back to LGM. So again, going to be important to keep an eye on the pace of the Aston Martin and the Alfa Romeo, as Zersity is the next to receive a penalty with a 3-second penalty, but it's still a purple sector for Crooner. So these older intermediate tires could still continue to work theoretically, at least for a number of laps still, if Crooner is still showing very strong pace. And that Red Bull car, he'll not come in this lap, and neither will Elgem. So we'll have to keep an eye on and see if any of the other drivers decide to come in, as Zersity continues to close the gap to Kevin Cal, as Crooner sets another fastest lap of the race. That's a 138.8, as Zersity makes a move on Kevin Cal, who dives into the pit lane. So that's our third driver pitting now off this first set of enters, as we can see Zersity getting maybe a little bit loose there on exit. Looks like Alexis Beats is diving into the pits, so the one AlphaTauri car will be looking to pit and try and make some time up. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these pit stop choices begin to fan out. So we'll certainly spread out our field at least a little bit. But the question of will it affect the pace of our drivers is another thing entirely to consider, as we can see Kevin Cal coming out just behind Formula Jonah. So there'll be the Williams driver currently in 8th position. But yeah, for these drivers coming out of the pit lane, it's going to be very important to get those tires fired up as quickly as possible, which could be very difficult with these wet conditions and with the new tire models for this game. As we can see Viperize as well diving into the pit lane. Crooner maybe a little bit wide and onto the grass there, so potentially showing some of the wear of these intermediate tires that have been on his car since for about 12 laps now. Very interesting, as Crooner will stay out. Elgem will decide to pit, so the Mercedes is going to be looking for that undercut now. His teammate Yeb Boring will stay out and continue to chase after the Red Bull of Crooner. That'll be very interesting to watch, as Crooner now begins lap number 14 out of 26. Will anybody else elect to dive into the pit lane on this lap? And when will Crooner as well decide to make that jump in? Of course, Crooner still with the fastest lap, so showing those intermediates still have a solid amount of pace in them. We're now a 5-second gap back to Boring. Doesn't seem, as we now have T34 and Formula Jonah as well, both diving into the pit lane, as Kevin Cal able to overtake Jonah. So potentially a good amount of pace from these newer intermediate tires. Of course, we can't see the tire wear pop up on our screen here. This will be very important to see, as we have LGM, I'll do my math real quick, as we have Alexis Beast and Formula Jonah swapping places, but that's due to pit stops, as everybody's still on these intermediate tires. So still a 5-second gap between Kruner and Yaboring, as Dodoligo able to get a nice little gap, I believe making up about 2 seconds if I'm not mistaken. Almost, never mind, I believe it's almost 4 or 5 seconds on Formula Jonah, who may have had a little bit of an exit issue coming out of that pit lane. He's now got a 5-second gap back to Dodoligo, as our leader, Kruner, will now dive into the pit lane. Alexis Beast able to overtake T34 and move up into 8th place. So the AlphaTauri looking to come in as Yaboring in the Mercedes jumps in. Zercity in the second Red Bull dives into this pit lane. James 443 elects to stay out for another lap. So could James potentially look to take these intermediate tires the distance, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a possibility? And could this McLaren score some very solid points? Of course, being on his own today. So we have LGM jumping up nicely. Where will he come out in relation to that Red Bull of Kruner? Of course, he's going to have those tires nice and fired up now. As he pulls closer, the gap is now down to about a second between Kruner and LGM, as Duncan as well dives into the pits. And so it'll just be, as we have a yellow flag in Sector 2, I believe that is Viperize spinning out down on the exit of Cops. So the day goes from bad to worse for the Alpine car, as his struggles have continued since really early on in this race. It's Kruner and LGM are continuing to battle as they did really early on in this race. It seems like Kruner's starting to get those tires, those intermediate tires, fired up now, as Dodoligo receives a 3-second time penalty for going off track just one too many times. So continue to battle here, now down the Hangar Straight and into, through Maggots and Beckett's. Now it's about half a second that separates the drivers. So it'll be very interesting to see what James does here, because once we cross the line here, it'll be about 11 laps to go. So we got the McLaren here. Will he choose to dive into this? No, he will continue to stay out with about an 8.8 second gap behind him. So definitely just looking to attack those curves, but it seems that Kruner certainly has a lot of pace behind, making up a significant amount of time. These 15-lap old intermediates on the McLaren continue to wear down, as we have LGM actually setting a new fastest lap of the race in that Mercedes. So the new intermediate tires may be the choice to make, as LGM shows that, yes, switching to new inters could have significantly more pace, as the Red Bull of Kruner a little bit wide as they come now through turns number 3 and 4. It's Village and the Loop, as Speedy Gunner receives a 3-second time penalty down in P12. So that's certainly not going to help his cause at all, as the gap coming down very quickly on James. I believe that's about half a second in that first sector already from James to Kruner that gap has come down, and it continues to drop. So you can just see it drop about 2 or 3 tenths there. Already down to 7 seconds is the gap. I believe it was 8 seconds at the start of this lap. So it's certainly going to be a gamble here for James as to how long he wants to take before potentially pitting, or pitting at all, could be an interesting question. So that's going to be certainly something to watch as this race continues. No necessarily close battles, but it's definitely going to be important to watch this battle as it continues. So what will James decide to do here? James will continue to stay out here as we come across the line for the end of lap 16. Again, just looking to keep it nice, calm, and controlled. Potentially just looking to get a nice haul of points here, and not necessarily a win, even if that would be nice, as we have 2 drivers getting penalties, one of them being Formula Jonah. As we start here now with about 10 laps to go, Kruner sitting the fastest lap of the race with a 1:37.9, and the gap about 6 seconds. Remember that number for as we come across the start the next lap, because that could be very indicative of what the pace of fresh intermediate tires is. Of course, James being the only one to decide to take the strategy of trying to make these intermediate tires last potentially the whole race. The gap already down to 5.4 seconds as James comes through the end of that first sector. Just going to be looking to keep it nice and controlled, but the gap from James to Crooner is something that's going to be coming down all the time. Quite how much is certainly a question to ask, but if Crooner can pull up to the back of James very quickly, it could be very important to watch as Viperize once again receives a 3-second time penalty there through Maggots and Beckett. So we're sitting on board with the leader, James 443, in this orange and pink McLaren car on lap 17 out of 26 here at Silverstone. So certainly been a very interesting race so far. James being our third leader of the day. Of course, Crooner starting on pole, and then Alexis Beast, who currently sits down in 7th, was able, after starting in P3, was able to make the move stick early on, and then held the lead until he lost it under traction. Luckily, was able to keep it out of the wall and continue, but sadly sets down in P7 after showing really promising pace very early on. But the gap came down about 1.5 seconds that lap as we come across the line with 9 laps to go. So it should be by about lap 21 that we see James and Crooner start to go side by side. And that, I would assume that would be at the latest. That would be considering if James doesn't make any mistakes, because Crooner, I think, on those fresh intermediate tires is very unlikely to make a mistake, at least when compared to James and his 17-lap-old intermediates. And for anybody making the question there, if I'm not mistaken, I do still believe that James's strategy here of just taking the one set of intermediate tires is a strategy that does work with the game, so he will not be penalized should he choose to keep doing this. As we have an Alfa Romeo spinning out there in the final sector, that's Speedy Gunner, who certainly had a struggle. He had a brilliant battle with Dodoligo and Formula Jonah earlier in this race. Certainly got his elbows out there during that bit of his race. But sitting in 12th right now, definitely struggling to keep it on track, as you can see there. But just definitely going to be looking to hopefully get some points. I'm certainly not hoping that anybody crashes out for his sake, as the Alfa Romeo really struggling for grip through here, as T34 receives a 3-second time penalty. Is that the yellow flag in Sector 2? That, I believe, is an Alpha Tauri a little bit slow on the exit. That is T34, losing it a little bit as we start lap 19. The gap only coming down about 1.3 seconds that lap. So that could be interesting to watch, as Speedy Gunner once again with an issue. So yellow flags came out for him, but again, he's able to keep it going. But I think that Alfa Romeo just struggling for any sort of grip in these wet conditions. But everybody just kind of running their own race at the moment. Definitely a close battle between Kevin Cal and Xercity over 5th, as well as the battle between the Alpha Tauris and the Aston Martins for 7th through 10th. So those are certainly going to be battles to keep eyes on. But it's still James in that McLaren potentially looking to fight for a podium now. Of course, having not pitted yet, and looking to continue to work those intermediate tires as much as possible. So come through Cops now and into Maggots and Beckett's. The McLaren leading by about 2.5 seconds from Crooner in the Red Bull. Of course, on those much pressure intermediate tires. Elgem obviously as well close behind, so it's definitely important to note that penalty time for the two drivers ahead, as the Alfa Romeo Speedy Gunner continuing to struggle for any sort of grip, potentially having some bodywork damage to that car, but he'll be battling with Viperize. But here comes the leaders as they continue, so the gap about 2 seconds now as we come to begin lap 20. James certainly showing some very nice tire management so far, being able to continue to keep the car on track, even with these likely rather worn intermediate tires. Definitely a very nice color combination on that McLaren. Nice to have it stick out even with the cloudy and rainy day here at Silverstone. As they come down as they come down the Wellington Straight into Brooklands. It's about 1.7 seconds now that separates the two drivers. So, given the pace difference between James and Crooner as it stands, I think it's not a question of if, but when. But I think the main thing James is going to be looking to do is try and lock up a podium, if that is possible, which would be a great drive from the McLaren driver, which would be a great performance, rather, from the McLaren driver, who, if I'm not mistaken, started in P9. I believe I can check that very quickly. If we go to position change, yes. So he started, I believe, back in P10 as well. So a podium finish would be a great result for James here in this race. If you're just joining us, sitting here on lap 20 as we come through Sector 3 here in a wet Silverstone. Been wet the whole race, and we have James looking to potentially take these intermediate tires the entire race after starting on them with a 1.2 second gap back to the championship leader of the Red Bull of Crooner. As we now start lap number 21, it's about a 1.1 second gap between the two cars now. So now Crooner will be able to have his first couple of chances of this race, as we have Yub Boring in the Mercedes taking a new fastest lap of the race with a 137.9. And certainly, if some battle between Crooner, Elgin, and James goes down, Yub Boring could be right there to take advantage as Dodaligo and T34 battle side by side. And it's the Alpha Tauri winning out this time around. But definitely important to keep the focus up front now. 7/10 is the gap between the two cars, and that's a purple sector from Crooner as Dodaligo and T34 continue to battle now through as they come down onto the Hamilton Straight. And it's T34 able to hold that P9 for the moment, but about half a second now, the gap between the McLaren and the Red Bull as they come through Copse and blast down to Maggots and Beckett's. So it's going to be very important for James to get all the grip he can and the traction out of Chapel. That Crooner all over the gearbox, a little bit of contact between the two cars, just showing the immense difference in grip as they make contact there through Chapel. Coming down the Hangar Straight, the gap is now 0.3 of a second. And it's McLaren holding the lead for the moment as they come through Stowe. Once again, the Red Bull right on the gearbox of James as they both run a little bit wide. It's the Red Bull looking to the inside now as they go through Vale and Club. But it's James holding the lead for the moment. But certainly Crooner all over the back of him in these wet conditions. The gap about 0.4 as we start lap number 22. 5 laps to go now in this British Grand Prix. And it's James in the McLaren still leading as we now come into Village and the Loop. That Red Bull contact and spins James round. The McLaren slow on exit, and Crooner, just expecting James to have much more grip than he ended up doing, goes right into the back of him. Definitely nice to see the sportsmanship from Crooner there after realizing his mistake. But that means Elgin now leads by 4 seconds over the next two drivers, but that was a major mistake from Crooner. And James will certainly be reporting that one. It just seemed that Crooner's expecting James to have a little bit more speed, which James could just not carry there through the loop and into Aintree and down the Wellington Straight. So certainly something that will be talked about in the stewards' among the stewards at the end of this race. But that means Yub Boring now potentially in line for a podium position if he can chase down James. But it seems certainly now that Elgin will win this British Grand Prix after taking advantage of that incident between the two drivers. Xercity receives a 3-second time penalty due to track limits. Definitely important to check Crooner to see if there is any wing damage. If there is, it certainly is not visible, though it does seem that that Red Bull has a little bit less pace than he did before. But certainly a rough incident from the Red Bull, who's looked very strong and was looking to win this race before that incident as we cross the line now to start lap number 23. So James definitely still fighting for a podium place on these worn intermediate tires. As here comes Crooner looking to make a move stick properly this time. to come through the exit and come now down onto the Wellington straight. Going to be overtake going to be deployed all the way down the straight. It seems that there's plenty for Crooner available, just not quite enough pace even still to pull close enough and make the move stick down into Brooklands. Still very tight between as they come through Luffield, about half a second separating the two drivers, and that drops to about a quarter of a second as they now come through Woodcut and blast down towards Copse, and still the McLaren holding the advantage over the Red Bull driver as they continue through, but it's LGEM with about a 4.5 second gap up at the front, coming up to some back markers there. We do run ghosting, just so that way we don't have to worry too much about blue flags at the moment, but LGEM will certainly have to navigate them regardless. And I believe you may be able to pick up slipstream from them, but there's about a tenth of a second gap between the McLaren and the Red Bull. As they come now down into Stowe, it's going to be Crooner looking around the outside, James to the inside, and it's the Red Bull out ahead, a little bit of banging of wheel to side pod, and it's Crooner holding the advantage for now. James certainly going to be looking to make the move back on him, but not quite going to be able to make the move back stick as they come through Club, and it's Crooner, at least on track, moving back up into second place ahead of James 443. That move, and that's obviously going to be subject to review as Zercity and Kevin Cal go at it. Did Kevin Cal have an incident? No, but Alexis Beats with a third spin. So Alexis Beats certainly struggling to keep that car on track. Definitely had to reset there due to some struggles as Speedy Gunner and Viperize continue to battle over P12. But Kevin Cal and Zercity in the wall! Zercity in the wall! As it seems they made their way through Farm, there's potentially some contact with Kevin Cal. And so Zercity in the wall. Is there any damage to this Red Bull car? Going to be very important to note because he may have to pit with 3 laps to go now. Is there any damage? There is significant damage to that Red Bull. He does not have a front wing. So significant damage for Zercity. So that's certainly going to be demoralizing for the Red Bull. First Crooner with an incident with James 443, and now Zercity without a front wing with 3 laps to go may drop really far down this order. But at the front, it's still LGEM now with a 5.5 second lead. So Crooner, I think, getting some slight front wing damage from that incident with James early on in this race, as LGEM sets a new fastest lap of the race. James is going to have to defend from Mia Boring now, though it shouldn't matter, with the 3-second time penalty to James due to exceeding track limits. So there will certainly be some things to review at the end of this race, but I think something definitely to note is it's been a great drive from James so far. Certainly don't want to caster's curse him. But looking to take those intermediate tires the entire 26 laps of this race, as Zercity does have to go into the pit lane to repair that front wing as T34 and Formula Jonah swap places a little bit. So that's going to turn into a battle potentially for 9th place, depending on where Zercity comes out. So that's going to be something to watch as the end of this race continues to come. But LGEM just going to be looking to keep control and stay comfortable up at the front. A 6.2 second gap for LGEM out at the front. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this would be back-to-back wins for LGEM. It would, if he can keep it clean after winning last time out in Monza. With James with about 0.4 of a second gap, back to you boring. Able to keep it nice and close and maybe use the slipstream up those back markers ahead just to get enough pace down the straights to make it difficult for you boring to get a move through. But as we come here to start lap number 26 of 26, it's LGEM setting a new fastest lap of the race and continuing to lengthen that gap. So it's certainly been a rather chaotic. It's certainly been a mostly calm race, but with spurts of definite chaotic energy. But LGEM, after winning last time out in Monza now, looking to make it 2 in a row as James and Yup Boring continue to battle on track. T34 and Formula Jonah with a 10th of a second separating them as they come through Magnussen and Beckens. They still have a lap and a half left to go as they continue now. So they're going to be battling for 2 points there, but that could be very important as this championship continues to evolve, and it's Jonah now looking around the outside of T34 as they come down the straight now and into Sector 3, not quite able to make the move stick, but Jonah's still got a lap to make that move done, and penalty time is certainly something to continue to consider. I'll certainly pull that up now, but they're equal on penalties, so that could be something very important to watch. But it's Elgem looking to keep it nice and clean now through Maggots and Beckett's. Makes the exit out onto Chapel and down onto that hangar straight through Stowe. We saw multiple spins here in qualifying and throughout this race. He's just got to make it through one more time, and he's got about 3 corners to go. Oh, now, can he keep it clean? Of course, easy to miss any sort of mistakes through here. And it will be Elgem who wins the British Grand Prix from Mercedes. A great drive from him. Crooner, at least on track, will come home to finish P2. And it's James, at least for now, finishing P3 on track. And Boring will jump up to second after penalties are applied. So it's certainly going to be a Mercedes 1-2 on track. And almost certainly going to be James 4-4-3 in taking up that last spot on the podium, if I were to take a guess at the steward's decision. Kevin Cal, and what I believe is his Group 2 debut, finishes P5 for Alpine, so a very strong drive from him. Duncan picking up some nice points for Aston Martin here, comes home to finish P6. Alexis Beats, after having a very disappointing race, after starting off very strong, will spin across the line now. Is he able to keep that car moving? Yes, just about. And he's looking across that line, and he does finish P7. It's Dodoligo in P8. T34 or FR able to hold off Formula Jonah after a little bit of a challenge on these last couple of laps. Will come home to finish P9. Formula Jonah will come home to finish P10. And after a late race incident in which he lost his front wing, Crooner's teammate of Xercity will come home to finish P11 after having to come in and get that car fixed. Oh, okay. My jaw is tired. Oh, okay, that's a cramp. Ow. Alright. As the other Red Bull comes to cross the line and will end up in 11th. But it's a Mercedes 1-2 able to win the race, and it's Yup Boring taking that win. James certainly deserving of driver of the day, making those tires last the entire race. So a great result for him. Of course, this race will be subject to some steward review, but as the Mercedes driver celebrating on top, certainly deservedly, and the Mercedes 1-2 here should stand. So a great race, and we'll be looking to celebrate here in front of the Mercedes team. So certainly a great race, great way to go in the wet, and a very interesting race to see here in the wet. But it's the Briton winning his home Grand Prix, so it's Elgem in P1 and taking the fastest lap, so that's maximum points for him. It's the American of Yup Boring finishing P2, Crooner finishing P3 for Red Bull, and James also at his home Grand Prix making that zero-stop strategy work and coming home to finish in 4th. Kevin Cal then 5th. The Portuguese driver of Duncan finishing in 6th, with Alexis Beast in 7th after really struggling during that race. The Swede of Dodoligo comes to finish 8th. T34, the Pole, finishing 9th. And then it's Formula Jonah rounding out those point-scoring positions, picking up that last point in P10. So I'd certainly like to thank you for joining for this race. It was certainly an interesting one to watch throughout, and I certainly hope to see you next weekend in the streets of Azerbaijan for the Grand Prix at Baku. So it should be a chaotic race. First time the league will be heading there for both Group 1 and Group 2. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell down below. And regardless, hope you have a nice rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next